I'm Cathal Summers.
And I'm Deirdre,
your Teagasc Sustainability Advisors, and you're welcome to the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast number 42, bringing you the latest information, science and opinion to improve farm sustainability.
There has been a lot of talk about Ireland's derogation in recent times, which allows farmers to qualify to a higher stocking rate on their farm. Teagasc Environmental Specialist Tim Hyde joins us to discuss derogation and the environmental standards involved.
I'm going to step back a bit and go to the nitrates directive, which applies to every farmer in the country, and that has a stocking rate limit of 170 kgs of N per hectare, which equates to roughly 2 dairy cows per hectare. And the nitrates derogation is applied every 4 years, and on top of that, we apply for the nitrates derogation to allow farmers to farm at greater than 170 up to 250 kgs of N per hectare. So that equates roughly to just under 3 cows. It would be the limit under the nitrates derogation. Around 6,500 farmers to 7,000 farmers every year apply for the nitrates derogation. Out of a total number of farmers, about 15,000 that would be kind of stocked in that stocking rate of 170 to 250. And every year, it's a yearly application. And what happens is, they seek the help of an advisor or a farm planner to do it for them. And there are certain rules under which they have to comply with each year to stay in derogation.
I suppose we have our derogation secured, I think, until 2025, and there's a mid-review, I suppose, in 2023 with the recent EPA water quality report not looking too healthy. Does this put pressure on that derogation?
It does put pressure on it, Cathal. I mentioned the midterm review there, and one of the items that falls in under that midterm review is Article 12 within the EU regulation, which refers specifically to water quality. And in that, it mentions about the competent authority will submit reports on the nitrates concentrations of groundwater, surface water, and the trophic status of surface water bodies, and including maps showing where those areas draining into by the end of June 2023. Now, also along with that, it mentions that the average nitrate concentration above 50 milligrams per litre and the word "or," and I'm going to mention that word "or" a few times, are increasing trends of nitrates concentration compared to 2021. It mentions eutrophic status or could come eutrophic status with a stable or worsening trend compared to 2021. So there's a lot of "ors" in there. It's not just "and" "or." And then it identifies that waters that could be polluted or at risk from being polluted or showing worsening trends. And all of those things are in that 2-year review. And that mentions then that if they're at risk or presenting worsening trends, the amount of manure that could be applied shall not exceed 220. So we mentioned that the derogation is at the limit is at 250 currently. And under this midterm review, going by what I've said there, it could drop to a limit of 220. So it would be concerning that, what's going to come out of these water quality reports over the years that we mentioned there of where they're going to do the comparisons, and will that eventually lead to a reduction from the 250 to 220?
And like that, what really that means, that's destocking, where we'll have to go down in numbers of animals, I suppose, or cows, if that goes down from 250 to 220.
Yeah, and the question is, we also have a double whammy here in that the dairy cow was producing 85 kgs of N per head per year a couple of years ago. This year it's gone to 89 kgs of N per head, and there is 3 different types of dairy cows coming into the system next year for these calculations, depending on the output of that cow. And we might talk about that later.
Yeah.
So there is potential then that the reduction could be just zonal.
There is a potential to it there, because it does mention some type of zonal restriction on the stocking rate. Ireland is a nitrates directive is an entire country approach. We didn't go for NVZs or nitrate vulnerable zones like some of our counterparts in other countries in the EU. We went for an entire country, but it may come down to maybe particular water bodies or catchment areas. Look, it all depends on how this is interpreted at national and European level, and how the water quality reports come out in those years that we're talking about trends.
But it is important, I suppose, for farmers to keep an eye on water quality trends and like the derogation and the midterm review, I suppose, because we myself and Deirdre, and I'm sure you, Tim, we'd be on lots of farms and people are trying to plan, I suppose, for the future, build milking parlours, build whatever they might be doing. And you really have to bear this in mind potentially if stocking rates could be cut, because the only way around it is get additional land, and the price of land is a fortune.
Yeah, and look, I suppose just to, yourself and Deirdre are out on the ground a lot with farmers, and we need to be conscious. There's been huge work done on farms in the last couple of years, especially through the ASSA program, but also through the general derogation requirements about water protection measures, fencing off water courses, not drinking from them, moving water troughs back, having the fence 1.5 meters back from the top of the bank, making sure there's no runoff from roadways. So, we've done a huge amount of work. It just might take a couple of years for those benefits to be seen in relation to water quality.
That's true. So I suppose, in terms of options for them, they'll either have to reduce numbers or they'll have to go into something like contract rearing would be an option for them. Exporting slurry.
Yeah, very much so, Deirdre. And look, there's 3 or 4 things there that we've done. Cathal has mentioned the price of land. Rent additional land is obviously one option. What you're trying to do here is dilute your stocking rate.
Yeah,
to bring it below. So it's rent extra land, reduce stock numbers, maybe get rid of cull cows out of the system, and then pros and cons for doing that when we talk to about cow banding, exporting slurry, contract rearing, as you mentioned, Deirdre, and you may be able to B&B or put cattle into other herds for being grazed off during the summer, similar to a contract rearing situation.
Now is a good time to assess your options then, really, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
So what system is used by farmers and advisors to ensure compliance with derogation? We have the nutrient management planning, the Teagasc tool. Can you talk us through this, Tim, a little bit?
Yeah. So as part of the derogation every year, it's required that a farmer has an up-to-date nutrient management plan. We call it the NMP online system. Nutrient management plan is really just a fertilizer plan for your farm for the year to make best use of the soil samples that you have, using the croppings that you have in your basic payment scheme. And it's that that's available to all planners across the country, all agricultural agencies, even available to co-ops, people in college studying agricultural science and things. So it's a Teagasc design system, but everybody can get access to it. As part of that fertilizer plan, there's some key messages that can come out at the end of it. There's a good bit of data to be put into it, like your soil samples and your cropping and your areas, the size of your sheds and tanks. But at the end of it, the output is you're looking at the soil fertility status of the farm, the percentage of the farm that might be at P index 3 or K index 3 or 4, which is optimal. And where you can make savings in relation to spreading P or K. You're looking at your liming plan based on your soil sample results and your pHs. You can look at the overall chemical fertilizer limits that you're allowed on the farm, and with the department fertilizer register coming in next year, I suppose there's even more emphasis on that. You can also look at the slurry capacity and the storage capacity on farm. And it also helps you to keep an eye on the soil fertility trends on your farm, because you have to soil sample every 4 years in derogation. And most derogation farmers do that, and even they shorten that down to 2 or 3 years. So they really need to keep track of their soil fertility, because good soil fertility or optimal soil fertility at P3, K3, and good lime means you're going to grow and utilize as much grass as possible and save money overall. So, that system that we talk about that used for compliance, it's not just for compliance, but also for good soil fertility management. And every derogation farmer every year engages with that through their advisor.
I think some of the best money you'll ever spend, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, is getting your soil samples done, but don't leave them in a jar, put them into an actual nutrient management plan. For us and farmers that I work with, being able to pull up nutrient management plan online with all that information that you said about their storage requirements, the animal feed coming into the farm, the fertilizer, how much nutrients are allowed to spread. It's huge amount of data for a farmer to be able to manage the farm better, isn't it?
I would fully agree with you, Carl. And, both of you have been in the advisory role dealing with fertilizer plans through the years. we don't spend enough time discussing that or sitting down with the farmer, or even the farmers engaging back with us with questions about, this is my overall soil fertility status. Where am I sitting? It's a fantastic tool, and I would advise any farmer or agricultural consultant listening to this call to maybe pick up the fertilizer plan that you have for your client or for your farmer. And it's a great time of year to look at, well, where are you in relation to the amount of lime you're supposed to have spread? Where are you in relation to, maybe at this time of year, do you need to top up a little bit with potash? What do I need to be thinking about forward buying maybe for my P and K compounds for next year? Do I need to soil sample again? Am I not happy with one or two fields? Should I resample a couple of them? So, it's a tool that should be engaged with. I would say, I won't say monthly, but I would say every quarter there should be an engagement with it to try and get the best out of it.
I suppose it's also used as a record keeping tool as well to be compliant under derogation, because these derogation farmers have a huge amount of areas that they have to be compliant in. So I suppose this time of the year we'll be encouraging them to get together their meal statements and their fertilizer dockets, coming into towards the end of the year, so that their advisors can put together their records for the coming year.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Deirdre, as well. As part of the records that have to be submitted by the derogation farmer at the end of the year, when they're normally submitted by the end of March, let's say for 2022, by the end of March 23, you have to know how much slurry you spread by low emission slurry spreading. You have to know how much lime you had to spread, and there's a requirement there of 25% of your lime requirement every year. And you mentioned there about the line, or about the fertilizer dockets and gathering the meal dockets. All those type of things are needed for next year's fertilizer plan and to get this year's fertilizer records into the department on time.
And just for the non-farmers that listen to the show, and we have quite a few, they're probably wondering, why is it a certain cohort of farmers are allowed a derogation from Europe to stock heavier? But there is a huge amount of regulation that comes with being allowed into derogation, isn't there?
There is. There's a higher. They have to farm to a higher standard in relation to the environment, and there are a number of measures there that other non-derogation farmers don't have to do, that the derogation farmer has to take on board. And we can run through those if it suits. And
yeah, if you have a few of them there, throw out a bit of a list there to us.
Yeah, I always like to say it's like there's 12 inches in a foot. There's 12 kind of things that I think a derogation farmer has to do over and above what the non-derogation farmer has. Obviously they have to soil sample every 4 years. But out of that, they have to do. They have fertilizer limits for the farm, P's and K's, N and P, sorry, and they have to do a compulsory liming program based on what the soil tests are. They have to spread all slurry with low emission slurry spreading. For the months April to September inclusive, they have to reduce the crude protein to animals fed at grass to 15%. They have to attend a good bit of training, and what we've heard back from the training is that the derogation farmers have found this as a positive thing of being in derogation. The amount of engagement they get with issues like biodiversity, water quality, gaseous emissions, soil fertility, grassland management and measurement. Okay, inclusion of clover in grass seed mixtures to reduce nitrogen. Farm biodiversity, so leave more hedges on the farm uncut, cut them in a 3-year rotation, leave one white thorn every couple of 100 meters to grow to maturity. And moving, we've mentioned already about the water protection ones, moving your fences back from water courses, no drinking from water courses, move water troughs 20 meters away. There are a lot of things there that the derogation type of farmer is doing over and above the non-derogation farmer, and really contributing to the environment in relation to there's less runoff, reducing fertilizer usage by using lime, clover. The emissions are brought down by using low emissions and reducing the crude protein. And there's adding to biodiversity as well. So there's an awful lot of additional requirements on a derogation farmer over and above the ordinary farmer. But what we have seen is the direction of travel the last couple of years in relation to what the derogation farmer had to do 3 or 4 years ago is now kind of coming in mandatory for other farmers. And the derogation farmer has stepped up the requirements that they have to do. And there's nothing to say that those higher requirements will now become part of what's normality for every farmer in the country down the road.
But the good thing about this is it's not really a stick to beat people with. a lot of the list that you just listed out there is they're hugely beneficial to the farm. They'll actually make the farm more efficient long term for the farmer and productivity as well as part of that.
Yeah, 100%. Like, a lot of you could nearly break it down into two things. One is about soil fertility and maximizing the nutrients on your farm that you have inside the farm gate and getting liming right. More bit of clover in the system, using low emissions correctly, having more storage so you don't have to go out first thing in the spring, but you can keep it to when you need it when the grass is growing in March, April. And anybody who has plenty of storage and is using low emissions and has fertility right and the liming plan, you're ticking all the boxes very quickly. And I've heard farmers say that maybe we were missing one of those elements all along, or two of them. Now that we have all four in play, we are seeing that grass growth we've reduced nitrogen, we're increasing the grass growth, our utilization is better, and we're saving money at farm level and also been good for the environment and gas emissions and water quality. So there's a lot of positives in it.
Tim, what do you think are the consequences, or what are the consequences for not meeting some of these mandatory derogation requirements?
It's a very good question, Deirdre, because nearly 7,000 farmers applied for derogation this year. It's been hovering in around 6,500 for the last couple of years. This year's increased a bit. I expect quite a large increase next year in relation to the number of farmers that will be thinking about going into derogation. But there are rules there that you have to abide by, and if you don't abide by those rules, most of those rules mean that if you are caught during an inspection that you don't have the rule implemented, can mean rejection from derogation. Now, some of the minor ones are a penalty situation, 1%, 3%, or 5%, but in the majority, those rules mean rejection from derogation. Now, there is something to be aware of that's new for this year in 2022, in that if you're rejected from derogation in 2022, you cannot apply for derogation in 23. So it's a double whammy. You're out for this year and you're out for next year. And in those areas where you have very high stocking rates on all the farmers in an area, there isn't much ability to get extra land or dilute your stocking rate or get a farm to export slurry too. So, you're getting hit on the double. And to be fair, any farmer that is really committed to the derogation and being in it, meeting these requirements, you get a notification from your planner or your agent or your consultant every year about what you need to do. So, as long as you can tick those boxes. And I'd say, we have a very good derogation section on our public website at teagasc.ie. Just go into the search and type in derogation. It'll bring you directly to the page. And you flick through there. If you're a farmer in derogation or even considering going into it next year, go in there and have a look at all the requirements. I've mentioned a lot of them here already.
I suppose it's vitally important for people who are considering maybe to go into derogation, that not just to jump into it willy-nilly, that you'd really want to be sure that you can comply to the regulations, because if you do go into derogation and you happen to not comply with something and get thrown out, you're stuck, and you have stocked your farm to suit the derogation, you could lose anything up to 3/4 to nearly an animal per hectare off your farm. That could be nearly 33% of your stock.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Cathal. One of the main requirements is that you have to have enough slurry storage, and that is one of the key things that keeps farmers from going into derogation. And you are correct. If you don't meet the requirements and you've increased stock to be at that stocking rate level between 170 and 250, if you have to suddenly come down the year after, you are talking that, it could be a partial animal per hectare that you need to come down. But I think the main thing here is, look, go visit our public website. We have a good bit on derogation in there. There are advantages to being in derogation because you get more training, you have more contact time with your advisor, you have a fertilizer plan every year, you're allowed more chemical N&P if you're in derogation, if you apply for it. You can get additional P from the P buildup. There's a section in it that allows you to apply for P buildup. So there are advantages there. And like anything else, just make sure you know what you're signing up to.
Well, Tim, really enjoyed the chat today, and thanks a million for joining us on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode of the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast. Thanks to Teagasc Environmental Specialist Tim Hyde for joining us on the show.
Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Cathal Summers.
And I'm Deirdre Glenn.
Join us next time for the Teagasc Environment Edge podcast, signpost to farm sustainability.